At Campus Consultancy, we believe in eight simple words. Better student leaders make university better for everyone. I'm going to move this screen down here so I'm not looking up there, and we're going to do all of that again. At Campus Consultancy, we believe in eight simple words. Better student leaders make university better for everyone. Today on Better Student Leaders, I'm joined by Andy Skidmore, CEO of the Youth Impact Foundation. Andy leads a non-profit social enterprise that reaches over 160,000 young people each year across Australia and New Zealand. With a background spanning media, coaching psychology, and social entrepreneurship at Stanford, Andy has spent more than a decade shaping leadership and wellbeing programs through organizations like Burn Bright and the National Leadership Forum. His passion lies in helping young people flourish and guiding businesses, charities, and social enterprises to do good in ways that are impactful and sustainable. Andy, thanks for joining me for a chat.
Nice. Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We were saying just before we started recording that I think we last caught up in 2019 in a pre-COVID world, and it sounds like a lot's happened in your world since then.
Yeah, a lot's changed in the world and in my world too.
Very true. So tell me a little bit about some of those changes. When we were chatting, it was growing and scaling up Burn Bright, and you've now grown from founding that into leading a foundation that integrates all sorts of different youth organizations under one umbrella. I'd love to talk to you about the idea of scaling impact and how do you scale programs and the people behind them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a question that we're still learning the answers to. But yeah, for me, in 2014, I founded an organization called Burn Bright that was helping young people, especially in schools, so years 7 to year 12, but with a real focus on year 10 to year 12, think about their leadership and what leadership looks like for them. So in that student leadership space, just like you, but for high school young people. And in 2014 to 2020, we were growing and scaling that, and it was starting to become a bit of a well-known brand in schools across Australia. Obviously, COVID hit, and at the time, I started to ask myself the question of what's the biggest way that I can make the biggest impact on the most amount of people possible. And I think when you're faced with a question like that, you've got to think beyond what you're currently doing and think to a bigger reality or a bigger possibility. And so for me, we started to explore this idea of how do we not only deliver programs through Burn Bright, but how do we collaborate across the sector? And coincidentally, at the same time, I met a strategic philanthropist, and that strategic philanthropist partnered with myself and a few other youth based charities to build the model of the Youth Impact Foundation. And this was in 2021, 2022. And so we built a model where we wanted to think about how do we reduce the duplication that exists in the charity landscape, but at the same time, increase the impact. Lots of people have got different opinions on this, but we would say that there's a lot of charities that exist that are all trying to chase the same dollar, but also trying to make the same impact. So if we could work out how we'd work well together, then maybe we could create a solution that not only had a bigger impact on young people, their well-being, their mental health, and their leadership, but also on getting a greater economies of scale out of the sector. So what we've done over the last 2 to 3 years is we've merged or integrated together 9 what were once standalone youth organizations that are now integrated into the Youth Impact Foundation. And what that means is that their old charity doesn't exist anymore. Their previous charity doesn't exist anymore. They now have integrated their brand and their program delivery into the Youth Impact Foundation. And we still deliver their programs as they once were to the market, to schools, to young people through digital face-to-face and camps. But we do it as a collective, one team, one dream. And Burn Bright was the first charity we merged into that model. So it's been a really exciting journey. In terms of scaling, I think that in the charity landscape, the Australian Charities Not for Profits Commission, who's a regulator of charities in Australia, they tell us the average charity size, the majority of charities are below $250,000 of revenue a year, which if you think about it is literally trying to run a business on the smell of an oily rag. Like to be able to create impact, employ people properly and create the change you're after on that amount of money is next to impossible. So if we could combine organizations together and we could have this economies of scale up kind of merge model, we'd be able to achieve a greater scalability and we were able to ensure that the dollars we spend essentially went further. But I think, one of the challenges with that is that all the programs we deliver are reliant upon people and humans. And scaling humans is a really fun and interesting question because some of the most scalable companies in the world are tech companies that don't rely upon human beings to deliver the service, but software as service. So how to scale human beings and keeping on delivering impactful programs is probably the biggest question that we've had to keep asking ourselves as we've built the Youth Impact Foundation model.
Interviewing you, Andy, is so easy because you ask yourself the next best question. So let me ask you, how do you scale humans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think inevitably any founder-led business is always going to have quality at the center of their organization. No matter if they're a charity or if they're a for-profit or wherever they might exist, they're always going to have quality at the center. And that's really important because most people who start start a charity because they care about an issue. And when they care about an issue, they want to be able to solve that problem. And most of the time in the youth mental health and leadership space, they'll go out to try and run a program that goes into schools, that delivers a program that makes an impact. But what these charity founders often find is that as they grow a little bit, they can't be everywhere all at once. They can't make the sales, they can't talk to the schools and deliver the programs. So they start to employ staff. And unfortunately, the charity sector, they can't pay big wages, so they employ their friends or the people who are around them, or they find people who are happy to work for next to nothing. And that means that maybe they're employing people who don't have skills that might be in that area, but are really passionate. And I think one of the biggest challenges is as the programming or as the programs you're delivering get further away from you, um, you have to be okay and comfortable with an inevitable kind of loss in quality. The question you need to ask yourself is to what extent are you happy with that loss in quality? And if you can set yourself a target to say, well, if what we deliver, I'll call 100%, because if it's not 100%, then why are you delivering in the first place? Um, so are you happy with 90%, 80%, 50%? And then to what level of scale are you happy to achieve with that loss of quality? And that's the question you've got to ask yourself. Am I happy to be making an impact in a small geographical area at 100%, but not scale my footprint any bigger? Or do I think 80% of our program quality is still going to create change? And then therefore we're happy to scale up beyond us. Now, that's not to say the people you bring into your teams aren't incredible. My team at the Youth Impact Foundation is amazing. They're passionate. They're so good at delivering programs, way better than I ever was. But accepting a level of quality drop actually may not be about the quality. It might be about letting go of the program delivery and seeing what emerges when you have more people who come on board to deliver programs. What really excites me about the Youth Impact Foundation model is we've been able to keep incredible humans delivering programs. And Burn Bright programs don't look how they used to in 2019 because I and Leighton, who founded Burn Bright with me, have stepped back and we've let our team take over what works and what's needed for young people. And I think that our programs look even better now than they did in 2019. And that's across the whole foundation. But we also have to be willing as a founder to let go a little bit as well as accept maybe some difference of opinion or ideas about how you create change. And so feels messy. Scaling humans is messy, but it's also so joyful because if you weren't doing this in a team, it'd be really hard to show up every day because it's a hard slog. It's difficult. So doing it with other people who love what you do is the only way that I think you can work in a space like this.
Beautiful. For the staff listening today, I think they're really going to enjoy the strategic organizational side of the podcast. It's a bit of a different lens than we've taken with previous ones. So I really encourage you, dear listener, if you're listening right now, Andy is someone who is scaling up. And as we said in the intro, seeing over 160,000 people per year. So if you're thinking about your university in particular and thinking, geez, we've got this program, it works well for 200, but how do we get to 2,000 or 20,000? Some of the strategies Andy's sharing with us so generously here today, and thank you, Andy, are things that have scaled programs up to orders of magnitude bigger than that. There is no university in Australia as big as what the Youth Impact Foundation are catering to every year. And obviously they go into lots of partner schools to do that. So I'd keep in mind and encourage you to keep in mind some of the strategies and some of the thinking that Andy is saying today. How could you put that into practice in your work? And Andy, I'd love to ask you a little bit. I know that Youth Impact Foundation talks about changing the narrative for young people, and you mentioned how some of your programs don't look like they used to. Are there any ideas or any new ways of delivering or any general improvements that, as you have taken that brave step to hand off some of the programs to your very qualified and expert teams, have there been any new ideas that have come about that you sat back and just thought, wow, I never would have thought of that? Or like, I didn't actually think that would have worked, or we tried it and it didn't work. Is there anything like that that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that uh, in the programs we've integrated into the Youth Impact Foundation, so the charities that once standalone that have now merged, what's really exciting for me is that different program types are always going to work for different young people. And I think this is the same wherever you might find yourself. Any product that you put into the market, you need to know who that product is for and what that product is. Like, who are you selling to? You're never going to be able to sell your product to 100% of the market because different products and different types of products talk to different people. That's why we have brands, that's why we have product differentiation. That's why we have a unique selling proposition. All these things allow us to talk to our target market. And one of the things in the student leadership development world in high schools is that different schools have got different values. They belong in different geographies. They exist for different types of young people. They might have a higher portion of people whose first language is not English or who don't speak English at home, or they might have a high portion of people who weren't born in the country or who live regionally and rurally or who live in metro areas. Every school is different and has got different values and different young people. And every program that's offered into a school has a different unique selling proposition. And I think what's really cool about the Youth Impact Foundation is our ability to be able to reach more young people by having a differentiated suite of programs, by offering different things that have got different styles of program delivery. So, for example, one of our biggest scale programs runs through the Youth Leadership Academy Australia. It's a conference style program where schools send their young people to the ICC or the MCC or the big convention centres, and thousands of young people pack in there for a day, and that's a really high scale approach, right the way down to a really bespoke teacher training with the Youth Engagement Project, one of our other brands, where there might be 10 educators in the room and they're working in depth on strategies around self determination theory. Those are two really different approaches. But what I've learned is that when you homogenize program delivery or your product, you actually lose who you're speaking to. You lose your target market or the reason why you exist in the first place. And so, maybe in terms of innovation, what I actually think is innovative is making sure that you continue to reach the people who you exist to reach and creating an impact on them. I think maybe I'm a bit old school, but in our world of technology, what I actually think we're missing is face-to-face human relationships. And we know that our well-being, no matter how old you are, is determined by the quality of your relationships. The stronger the quality of your relationships, the stronger your well-being will be. And that's with your family, friends, community, wherever you may find yourself. So what I love about our programs is that they can be very simple in a way of reminding people that the connections we form online are important and can provide us meaning, but those face-to-face relationships that really stir up the neurochemicals that allow us to really benefit our well-being. So I think sometimes it's about going back to basics in a world of innovation that is really important for us as well.
Love that. It's funny, just over the weekend with Shane before we recorded that I put out my first book, and one of the quotes I use in the middle of that book, I say it took me way too long to learn the most important thing I've ever learned, and the thing that I learned is that relationships are the most important thing.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And think that's humans are wired that way. And if we forget that, then it can be a really lonely, hard existence.
Mm. A lot of the time, and maybe this is a throwback, I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are of why we struggle with this. Like I dropped my three and a half year old little boy off at school. It's his best friend's birthday today. Happy birthday,
Mm.
Harry. Happy fourth birthday. Um, and little kids in a daycare, they know that relationships matter. They go find a friend, they play a game. I think we unlearn that. I think we know that and we unlearn it. My theory is, I'd be interested in your thoughts here, that in school, your name's the only name on the report card, that you get an A in maths, nobody else.
Mm.
And that we reward on a very individual basis. And I promise this is leading to a question. The outcome of this is in the workforce, it's not like that. In the workforce, it's all about success. Like Youth Impact Foundation, everything you've been speaking about today is people, people, people. So I see this gap between what we're rewarded for in school and what we're rewarded for in work. In work, it's about people and collaboration and teamwork. In school, it's about the individual in a really narrow focus, if you know what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah,
Like it shouldn't be
yeah,
that at who sits your test, you sit your test kind of thing.
yes.
So I'm wondering for you, across all the programs that you've seen, your own experience in the whole organization, how do we help young leaders, whether they be in school with you or in uni with me, how do we help young leaders see and believe that relationships truly are the most important thing? And then how do we get them investing in or leaning into a style of leadership that is collaborative and isn't just about the individual?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that unfortunately, the school system and how it's set up, um, rewards curriculum achievement over anything else. And there's been a big movement over the last, I don't know, call it 10, 15 years for what have been dubbed 21st century skills or soft skills. I don't really like that term, but um, that are around collaboration and around teamwork and around listening to other people's ideas and all these skills that we need in the workplace. But I think what happens is that because of the way the school system is set up, we end up defaulting back to not those things because it's much easier on your report card to deliver a grade. Imagine trying to deliver a grade on collaboration.
Mm,
How would a school ever quantify that in a way that was fair and systematic? It's almost impossible because it's not designed to be graded. It's designed to be worked out and thought through, and uh, partnership and teamwork doesn't shouldn't get a grade. So
mm.
that I think that's the challenge.
Can I offer you something on that, Andy? So I
Mm,
had this experience. I'll be interested just to jam on this with you. I don't have a conclusion here. So I spent a couple of years as a graduate recruiter, and we were assessing for skills and mindsets. We were ultimately hiring people to become teachers to go into classrooms,
mm,
and some of the skills we actually had to interview for and look for in group activity days were things like teamwork and empathy. And what they didn't, so you know how you always hear that employers want those skills. So
mm.
employers have to assess those skills. So what employers have made are assessment rubrics such that you can ask a behavioral interview question or observe someone in an individual in a group activity or give them a hypothetical. Those are sort of the three, like past
Yeah,
experience, present experience, future experience, and create rubrics to actually assess what you see and what you hear and give them a grade. So those
yeah,
tools,
interesting.
they actually, yeah, it's interesting, hey, because when I learned it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I never knew how important these were. One, two, I didn't know that you could find ways to assess them somewhat objectively, not even subjectively, like pretty objectively.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but three, like I didn't know how to succeed in that world until I sort of saw them from the other side.
right.
So I even wonder there if like is the opportunity to start bringing some of that education, is the Trojan horse there through leadership? Is it a way to introduce these employment skills, these 21st century skills, the way they're assessed and what they mean, is maybe a way to get that through to younger people through this idea of leadership, to present it and say, hey, these are skills that you can actually be graded on, 0 to 5 or always to rarely or never, or is there an opportunity? Do you know what I'm saying? Is there an opportunity there to
Yeah,
maybe
I think so.
challenge that?
I, I think one of the things that people hear when they hear the L word, the big leadership word, is
Yep,
they're the
capital L.
person who stand on the stage in front of me and deliver a speech, or they're the person who is on my TV, often lying behind the camera because they're a politician, and we think all politicians lie, which is not true, but a cynical suggestion maybe that we've been brought up with. And so I think we developed a resentment towards leadership maybe in our society that I think the
Interesting.
work that you're doing, Josh, and the work that we try and do helps to break down those barriers. And a helpful kind of mental model that we use that I talk about quite a lot to um, maybe think about this is leading self and leading with others. And we used to call it leading others, but we threw the with in because leading with others is actually the way that we believe that we should lead because that authoritarian autocratic style of leadership is probably needs to be left in the 19th century and doesn't actually allow us to lead in a way that brings our team with us or people with us. So even if you don't think you're a leader, we would always encourage you to think about, well, who are the people you're influencing in your life and who influences you? Because chances are that even if you don't have a title or a badge or a role, that you are displaying leadership qualities and learning leadership qualities all the time, and people will look to you as a leader regardless. So get that out of the way. All of us lead in some capacity and are leaders in some capacity, and I think that's right up both of our alleys. But when you then think about this idea of leading yourself and leading with others, it's a great way of being able to assess yourself on what are the qualities that I need to lead myself, and what are the qualities and the attributes that I need to lead with others. Things like collaboration and things like teamwork and goal setting and vision setting. And some of these also go across both domains as well. being able to set a goal for yourself and then being able to cast a vision for a team as a leader, those two things are inherently associated with each other. But learning to just set goals for yourself and then learning how to achieve them for yourself is a great first step to then working in a team. So I think that inherently, if we can, even if we don't want to lead, learning how to lead ourselves is a great first start to being a leader, because at some point you might have a family. At some point, you might be in a relationship. At some point, you're going to be leading a team at work. At some point, you're going to be on the sporting field. We're all going to find ourselves in domains where we're going to be leading at some point in our life. And knowing how to lead yourself so you can be a great role model for others is a great first step. And then, secondly, knowing how you can lead with others and be collaborative in that leadership environment is critical. But finally, maybe I'd add on to that is a leadership model that we use quite a lot of the Youth Impact Foundation is this idea of servant leadership or service-based leadership, which we think is really critical because we think leaders that put others first in how they think about their leading is really important to ensure that they're leading out of contribution, not out of significance. And I
Mm,
think that that's
love that.
really important because when we lead out of significance, we're caught up in our ego, we're caught up in who we are and what we're trying to achieve and what our resume looks like. When we're leading out of contribution, we're leading out of service, and that gives us an opportunity to lead for what does this community I'm leading with or leading for actually need, and how can I best support them to achieve that, rather than what does it mean for me to have my name on LinkedIn, or what does it mean for me to win the award? All those things don't matter when you lead out of contribution. I think that knowing how we lead ourselves and lead with others then allow us to contribute in the best way possible.
Mm. I love that theme, and this has become a bit of a reoccurring theme of the podcast. A few years ago, I got to give my TED talk, and I called it "Leadership Equals Service." And last week, on the
Mm,
last episode of the podcast, I had Paul Clayton on, who's the CEO of the Student Experience Network in Australia, and I asked him at the end, "What's the number one thing that is a skill or a mindset that makes better student leaders?" And he just said bluntly, "Service." He said it's all about
mm.
service. It's about what you give, not what you get. So that's and it's a beautiful message. And your frame from before of leading with others, that one word in there, I think is so powerful. Um, I'm going
Yeah,
to
I
definitely
think
check myself as I use that and make sure I'm using with. It's like speaking with someone, not speaking to somebody. It's very.
it can be tricky though, right? Because
Mm.
a part of
Tell me about it.
leadership, I think, part of leadership is also sometimes you've got to set the direction, and
Hmm.
sometimes that's not popular. So I think a misconception with this idea of leading with others or servant leadership or service is that we just give over our power to the people who are leading and we just are on a whim to what they need. But actually leading through service is sometimes saying, no, I've got a clear vision for what this community needs. I've listened, I've learnt, I've sat with, I've sat alongside, and now we're going to go in this direction. And sometimes that means having to set a bold vision that might be countercultural, that might be against the norm, that might require speaking out. But I would still argue that that is in the best interest of the community, and you're still leading out of contribution and service. You're not leading out of significance because you spent the time listening, you spent the time learning, you spent the time understanding. But at some point, as a leader, we also need to step up and say, this is the direction we're going, and this is how we're going to get there together. And I think people, when that's been done in the right way, reward and support that because people leaders need to have followers, right? Regardless of how you want to describe that.
Mm.
Sometimes leaders, if you can't be a leader without people following you.
Yeah, 100%. Andy, tell me a little bit about if you're open to it. I think you've got this really nice juxtaposition of that leading with and getting input, but also some assertiveness of leadership and saying that if I'm hearing you right, that to serve to your highest level, it does mean charting a vision and speaking up and all that sort of stuff. I'm reminded of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As you spend a lot of time in churches and community groups and on the ground, but also there is a time to be on the stage and to declare what you believe. I'm wondering for your experience and maybe a parallel for our university staff who listen into the podcast. A lot of the times at university, there's duplication. I spoke to a university last week. They have more than 40 peer mentoring programs in one university, right? 40 programs in one university that
Yeah,
all essentially are doing the same thing.
yeah,
You're someone who has a lot of experience, and I think it's fair to say quite a lot of success in being with people, bringing organizations together, but then charting a direction and scaling up. Are you able to reflect on how you balance that tension in a practical way? Like, what does your calendar look like, or how do you change your tone when if I could put some words on you, like you're listening with Andy versus your, direction guiding Andy. How do you think about it? And then practically, how does that trickle down to your day to day?
Yeah, maybe this is a better question to ask my team, but I can try and answer
Hey,
it
I'm
in the
open to
best
it. We'll
way
do a part
possible.
two. Do a
Yeah,
round
yeah, do a
table and
part
grill
two.
you, mate.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure they'd say only the
uh,
most kind things.
I hope so. Yeah, I think it's in my role as the CEO of the Youth Impact Foundation, I'm pulled in lots of directions. We've got philanthropy and fundraising we need to undertake. We've got stakeholders we need to manage. We've got a board that I report to. We've got about 45 staff. And not all the 45 of our team report to me. That'd be crazy. But at some point, they trickled. It all, through our management kind of structure, it all kind of trickles to me, and the buck stops with me. Um, and I think this will be the same with the listeners to your podcast, Josh. There's so many in any education institution. There's so many competing priorities that are pulling you in lots of different directions. And I think that number one is being really clear on your vision and what you want to achieve. If you can have a vision that is cast, that people are inspired by it and want to work towards it. For us at the Youth Impact Foundation, we want to reach 1 million young people by 2030. And then
Beautiful.
out of that falls a few smaller bits and pieces that are also kind of the sub goals that work towards that. And we constantly are sharing that with our team, reminding our team, why do we exist? Why do we get out of bed in the morning? What does that look like? Because it can be arduous. Our team fly across Australia. Some of our teams spend over 150 nights a year away from their families. That's a big ask of anybody, regardless of how much you get paid or how much you believe in your work. So keeping the main thing, I think is really critical. And I think that's so important for a team, especially in purpose driven work. But secondly, in our integration model, we have got where we're merging charities together. We've got charity founders who started a baby. It's their baby. They started the thing out of often sometimes tragic circumstances. They're often out of a shared experience that is quite sad, or because they've seen a need, or because they've experienced something themselves. And they're heart driven leaders. And what they want to know is that their legacy and their impact that they've created is going to live on beyond them. And this is a question I think we all ask as humans all the time. Like, what is the legacy I'm leaving in the world? And how do I want to leave my mark on the world? And that question can be scaled right down to what's the impact I want to have on the people around me or the community that I'm currently operating in. It doesn't need to be as big and bold as what will I give my life to. But even on a smaller scale, I think that when you have that bold vision, then you've got to get alongside people. You've got to ask people
Mm.
where they're at, what are their needs, how could they be supported better, how could the environment they're working in be even more conducive to turning up at work? How do they make sure they keep enjoy turning up at work? What is it that they love to do? And I think on the flip side, though, is also how could they give to something bigger than themselves? Some of the charities we've integrated have been relatively small and they want to keep living out the legacy that they have, but also they're excited by giving to a bigger team, by working on a bigger vision and seeing how their part in that vision also comes to play. So maybe in summary of my kind of rambly answer there, it was
It's great.
vision is, I think, a really critical thing that a leader in my role needs to maintain. And when we lose sight of that, that's when problems start to emerge.
Mm. Do you mind if I share with you the image that came to my mind as you were saying that?
Yeah,
I
please.
sort of I sort of saw you, corny as it is. I sort of feel like if I prompted that into AI and said make an image for this would have come up. I sort of saw you there at like a base of a mountain, pointing to the top, but like with your arms around a team of people, and sort of saying like, I can't get up there by myself. We can't get up there as individuals, but this 1 million meter mountain, this million young people by 2030, we got a pretty good shot at getting up there if we do this together.
Yeah.
Um, and that like it's not a promise that it'll be easy, it's a promise that it'll be worth it, is what I hear in your answer. Tell me if I'm off base.
100%. And I think people that comes back to that servant leadership. It's something that I try and aspire to, and I'm not sure I get it right all the time. And I'm only human too, and so I think that kind of servant leadership model or is starting at the bottom with everybody together. And that doesn't mean that I'm out delivering programs, because what is best for my role is to make sure that we've got enough philanthropic dollars coming in that we can pay people's wages, that they can go and deliver the programs. So it doesn't mean as a leader I think another misconception of that is that doesn't mean as a leader you have to do the same job as everybody else, but it means you need to do your job how it's expected of you to do it so that everybody else can do theirs. And then when that's the case, when you show up in that way, then we can all walk up that mountain together.
Beautiful. Does it perhaps mean as well that you don't have to lead from the front? I think maybe that's a misconception sometimes that, you need to be
Yeah,
the first one charging up the mountain versus it sounds like what you're saying is, and for our uni staff listening, it's, you're running this peer mentoring program. You're not expected to mentor everyone in the peer mentoring program, but maybe it is actually going back and writing the strategic document to send up 3 levels of management to get the funding. So you get a 4-year funding deal. You're not fighting for 6 months of funding at a time. Like, is there something to be said about the position you lead from, front, back, sideways?
100%. And I think it's about knowing what is right at the right time. Being the hero as a leader is not a helpful thing for your team sometimes. If
Huge
it's like
myth.
if you're like smashing it out because you're like, if I'm the leader, I've got to do the most mentoring sessions because I'm the leader. Actually thinking about your role and saying to yourself, well, I've got a team around me who love doing this. This is one of the lessons that I through Burn Bright that was I love running programs for young people, but there's not many people in our sector who love running businesses or organizations for young people.
Mm,
And so I realized that my skills were to actually take a step back. And if I can make sure the operating environment that was around our presenters and facilitators was conducive to them getting paid properly, getting paid well, and making sure they had the environment to create impact, then my impact can be way bigger than if I was just out delivering programs all the time because we wouldn't be delivering, we'd only be delivering whatever my capacity is, call it 200 programs a year still. And now we deliver 1,000 programs a year. There's no way we could have done that if I had my head in the doing all the time. One of my lecturers at uni often talked about this idea of perspective taking capacity. I think that's what's critical as a leader, that if you want to step back down the mountain for a second to look up and go, actually, maybe we're going up the wrong path here. And if we all step back about this path, it'd be faster. But if you're in the detail, if you're in the weeds, if you're in the doing, you don't have that perspective taking capacity that you might need as a leader to make sure that you're on the right track.
brilliant. Andy, 1 million students, 1,000 programs a year, nearly a dozen organizations are not going to guide themselves. I want to be really respectful of your time today. Your leadership from when we met 6 years ago inspired me then. I am kicking myself that I have not followed up for more frequent conversations with you in the last 6 years. Like just talking to you, I'm just like, this is my guy. Like, I love it.
No,
I'm
it's great chatting
inspired.
again.
It's
Oh,
really
thank
it's
you. I
it's really
appreciate that.
nice, man. And it's you so clearly lead, if I can give you some flowers for a moment, you so clearly lead from contribution. And I don't think anyone listening to this for a second today would get even a sniff of significance, of ego, of anything like that. It's so genuine, it's so clear, and it's so inspiring to hear. And I really hope people who listen to the podcast feel the same way. I want to be really respectful of
Oh,
your time.
thank
I want
you.
to ask you one, of course, I want to ask you one final question if I can.
Yeah.
Since this is the Better Student Leaders podcast, and largely staff are listening in who run programs to support leaders, mentors, volunteers, what do you see as a skill or as a mindset that university leaders could focus on developing that would help them be the best leader they can possibly be?
Mm. Um, given serve was taken last time, I'm going to say relationships first. Put your relationships first. I think that a mindset where quality of relationships determines the quality of your culture, and the quality of your relationships flows head down. So, as a leader, you've got to model the way of relationships first.
Beautiful. Andy, thank you so much for your time. If people want to find out more about you, your work, or all the amazing organizations that fall under the umbrella, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, the Youth Impact Foundation on socials. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, or our website. You can find more information at theyouthimpactfoundation.org.au.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.